The moment I opened my eyes in the hospital, I realized two things. I was alive, and my son had already taken everything I ever saved. He didn't even wait for me to recover. He forged my signature, moved my money, and disappeared. But I didn't break down. I decided to disappear too, just not in the way he expected.
I always believed that the strongest kind of love is a mother's love, unconditional, endless, and patient. But I never imagined that the same love could become a greatest weakness. My name is Eleanor Hayes. I'm 63 years old. For most of my life, I lived in a quiet suburb outside of Seattle in the same small house where my son, Daniel, took his first steps. That home was my world. Every wall carried a memory, every corner a story. When Daniel was little, he was the kind of boy every mother dreams of. Curious eyes, messy hair, a heart full of questions. He used to bring me wildflowers from the backyard and say, "Mom, one day I'll buy you a big garden." I believed him. Maybe that's what mothers do. We believe, even when we shouldn't. After his father passed away when Daniel was 17, I became both parents overnight. I worked double shifts at a local diner, took bookkeeping jobs from home, anything to pay for his college. I skipped vacations, sold my jewelry, and used coupons for every grocery trip. Every dollar I saved went into a small account I opened for him. I used to call it Daniel's Future. He knew about it. I told him, "This isn't just money, honey. It's every hour I stayed up when you were sick, every meal I skipped so you could eat more. Promise me you'll use it wisely." And he smiled, that sweet, innocent smile that could melt even the hardest heart. "I promise, Mom," he said. But promises fade faster than we think. When he graduated from college, he moved to another city, said he wanted to find himself. I encouraged him, even though deep down, I already felt him drifting away. Calls became less frequent. Visits turned into excuses. And whenever I asked if he was okay, he'd laugh it off and say, "You worry too much, Mom." Years passed. I built a quiet life around my memories. My morning coffee by the window, volunteering at the local library, watering the same plants he once brought home as a child. I thought peace had finally arrived. Until the day everything changed. Last spring, I fell sick. It started with constant fatigue and dizziness. My doctor said it was anemia, but the tests hinted at something more serious. I didn't tell Daniel right away. I didn't want to worry him, but when I finally called, his voice sounded more annoyed than concerned. "You'll be fine, Mom. Don't stress. I'm kind of busy right now." That was the first time I felt like a burden to my own son. A week later, my condition worsened. I was admitted to the hospital after collapsing in my kitchen. Daniel finally showed up that night, holding flowers and guilt. He stayed for 15 minutes, asked a few questions, then talked more about his startup than my health. I tried to listen, tried to be proud, but something in his tone felt off. He spoke too quickly, avoided eye contact. I brushed it off. Maybe he was just nervous. Maybe I was just overthinking. 2 days later, the nurse woke me early in the morning. "Your son was here," she said. "He asked you to sign some insurance forms. You were half asleep, but you signed them." I blinked in confusion. I didn't remember signing anything. "Insurance?" I asked. She nodded. "She said it was for your hospital expenses." That moment stuck with me, like a quiet echo. That night, I lay in bed staring at the ceiling, trying to shake off a feeling I couldn't name. I told myself, he's your son. He wouldn't do anything wrong. When I was discharged 2 weeks later, I went home to find the house colder than ever. There were envelopes on the table, bills stacked high, and a note from the bank saying that there had been unusual activity in my account. My hands trembled as I opened my online banking app. The number on the screen wasn't wrong. It was just gone. Every cent I had saved, every dollar from decades of work. Zero. For a moment, I couldn't breathe. I tried to convince myself it was a mistake. maybe the hospital billing, maybe a system error. But then I saw it. The transaction record. His name, Daniel Hayes. It felt like someone had reached inside my chest and torn something out. Not money, not numbers. Something deeper. Trust. I called him. Once, twice, 10 times. No answer. On the 12th try, it went straight to voicemail. "Hey, it's Daniel. Leave a message." I stared at the screen and whispered, "Why, Daniel? Why would you do this to me?" I left the phone on the table and sat in silence. The clock ticked. Somewhere outside, the world went on. Cars passed, children laughed, the sun set, but my world had stopped. Hours later, the nurse from the hospital called. She said Daniel hadn't paid my remaining bills. The insurance forms he made me sign were just authorizations to access to my account. That night, I realized I had lost more than money. I had lost the last piece of my son I believed was still good. But I didn't cry. I didn't scream. I just sat there, staring at that empty bank screen. And slowly, one thought started to grow inside me. Quiet, but sharp. If he could betray me once, I could surprise him once too.
After that night, the world around me changed. Or maybe I did. The mornings didn't feel like mornings anymore. The house was silent, the air heavy, and every object carried his fingerprints. The son who had stolen everything. For the first few days, I just moved through the motions of living. Coffee, silence, bed, repeat. I didn't answer the door, didn't pick up calls. People from the church dropped by with soup and flowers, but I couldn't look them in the eye. How could I tell them that my own son had drained me dry? I had no one left but myself. That's when I opened the bottom drawer of my dresser and found an old envelope with my late husband's name on it. It was a letter he'd written before he passed away, something I had read years ago but never truly understood. If you ever find yourself alone, Ellie, don't look for comfort. Look for control. I sat with that line for hours. Control. Maybe I couldn't control my health or my age or the past, but I could still control what happened next. That night, I went to the kitchen, made a cup of tea, and turned on the small desk lamp. Then, I opened my laptop and began searching. I looked up everything: bank fraud, power of attorney, forged signatures, legal recovery, property transfer. At first, the words made my head spin, but as I read, a strange calmness replaced the anger. I wasn't going to chase him. I was going to outsmart him. I realized I still had something he didn't know about: my secondary savings account, one I had opened years ago with a different bank to deposit tips from the diner. It wasn't much, but it was enough to start something. The next morning, I called my husband's old friend, Richard. He was a lawyer who had retired years ago, but when he heard my voice, he immediately said, "Ellie, you sound different. What's wrong?" I took a deep breath. "Richard, I need to disappear for a while." He went quiet for a moment. "Disappear?" "Yes, I want Daniel to think I'm gone. Completely." There was another long pause. Then, in a lower tone, he said, "Tell me everything." For the first time in weeks, I spoke. I told him about the forged documents, the missing money, the silence. He didn't interrupt once. When I was done, he sighed and said, "Ellie, I can't undo what he did, but if you really want to vanish, legally, quietly, I know how." We met the next day at his small home office. He drafted papers, made phone calls, and guided me through the process of transferring ownership of my house and what little assets I had left into a private trust under my late husband's name. Once done, he looked at me and said, "From this moment on,
Eleanor Hayes does not exist on paper. You're invisible, at least to your son." I smiled faintly. Good. That's exactly what I want. That evening, I packed one small suitcase. Just the essentials, a few clothes, my wedding ring, a framed picture of Daniel as a boy, and a diary. I locked the door, left the keys under the mat, and walked away from the house I had built piece by piece. The bus station was quiet. I bought a one-way ticket to a small coastal town 3 hours away, a place where nobody knew me. As the bus moved, I looked out the window and watched the city lights fade into darkness. I whispered to myself, "He took everything, but not me." When I arrived, the town was still asleep. I rented a tiny room above a bakery and told the landlady I was a widow who'd lost touch with her family. She didn't ask questions. For the first time in years, I felt invisible, and somehow that felt safe. Days turned into weeks. I lived simply, making tea in the mornings, helping the baker downstairs, and writing in my diary every night. I thought about Daniel, of course. How could I not? I wondered what he was doing with all that money. Was he happy? Did he ever think about me? One afternoon, I decided to call my bank just to confirm something. I didn't want to speak to Daniel. I just wanted facts. When the woman on the phone said, "Ma'am, the account holder listed as Daniel Hayes has recently attempted to liquidate additional assets under your name," I froze. He wasn't done yet. He wanted more. But there was nothing left for him to take. At least, not from me. That night, I wrote in my diary, "If he's still chasing money, then it means I'm still haunting him." A week later, Richard called me. "Ellie," he said, "he's trying to sell your old house." I replied, "Let him." "He can't. It belongs to the trust now." He chuckled, the kind of laugh that hides both pity and pride. "You've really thought this through." "No," I said. "I just thought about how to stop thinking about him." I had no plan beyond peace. No revenge fantasy, no dramatic confrontation. I just wanted to live the rest of my days quietly, reading by the ocean, feeding stray cats, writing letters I'd never send. But life had other plans. One morning, a letter arrived at the bakery with no return address. The handwriting was familiar, shaky but unmistakable. It was Daniel's. The envelope was thick, as if it carried more than paper. Maybe regret? Maybe excuses? I stared at it for a long time before opening it. Inside was a single sheet. No apology, no explanation, just a few words written in blue ink. "Mom, I know you're gone. I don't know how, but I feel it. If you can see this somehow, I just want you to know I never meant to hurt you. I thought money would fix everything. I was wrong." The rest of the page was blank. I folded the letter back carefully, placed it in my diary, and whispered, "You'll learn, Daniel, because life teaches what mothers can't." I didn't plan revenge. Not at first. I only wanted peace. But peace doesn't come easy when the person who broke you still breathes free, and you're the only one carrying the scars. After I read Daniel's letter, something changed inside me. It wasn't anger. It was something colder. A quiet, steady realization that my silence had power. He thought I was gone, and for the first time in years, I had control. From my small rented room above the bakery, I began to rebuild. Not my finances, but my sense of purpose. I spent mornings by the ocean, writing in my diary, and evenings volunteering at the local library. The people there didn't know who I was. They just saw a woman with kind eyes and a peaceful smile. No one saw the storm underneath. One night, Richard called again. "Ellie," he said, "I think you should come by. There's something you need to see." I took the bus to his office the next morning. He greeted me with that same half-sympathetic, half-proud look he'd worn the last time. On his desk lay a stack of documents. "Your son," he said, "has filed for your death certificate." I blinked. "What?" "He told the authorities you passed away last month. He even presented a fake hospital record, the one he made you sign." "And they believed him?" "Not yet. But he's trying to claim what's left of your estate, which, of course, no longer belongs to you." I stared at the papers, a bitter smile rising on my face. "So he wants to bury me. Legally this time." "It looks like it," Richard sighed. "But he's about to bury himself instead." He explained that once a false death claim is filed, it automatically triggers an investigation for identity and inheritance fraud. If Daniel pushed further, he'd dig his own grave. "So what do you want to do?" Richard asked. I looked at the window and whispered, "Nothing. Let him keep digging." Weeks passed. I stayed in my quiet town, pretending to be a ghost. Every morning, I'd imagine him waking up, thinking his mother was gone, feeling free, maybe, even relieved. I wanted him to believe that freedom had a cost. Then, one afternoon, the inevitable happened. Richard called again. "It's done," he said. "He filed the full claim. The authorities are contacting the hospital now. They're going to find the forged forms. And when they do, he'll face charges for fraud, forgery, and misrepresentation." I didn't respond for a few seconds. Then I asked quietly, "Will they tell him I'm alive?" "No, not unless you want them to." I closed my eyes and then let him live with his version of the truth a little longer. 2 months later, I saw his face again. Not in person, but on the evening news. Local entrepreneur accused of financial fraud involving deceased parent estate. The reporter's voice was calm, detached, factual. But my world tilted. They showed a picture of him, tired, thinner, his eyes hollow. The boy who once brought me wildflowers now stood behind cold courtroom glass. I should have felt triumphant, vindicated, but I didn't. I felt nothing. That night, I sat by the window with a cup of tea and whispered, "I never wanted this, Daniel. I only wanted you to come home." The next morning, I got another letter. This time, it wasn't from him. It was from his lawyer. Apparently, Daniel had requested a private message be delivered to me, assuming it ever reached my hands. It read, "If you're reading this, Mom, then I know you're gone. They told me everything. The trust, the house, the investigation. I don't blame you. Maybe I deserve this. But I wish I could tell you one last thing. I didn't steal because I hated you. I did it because I couldn't bear to feel like I needed you." I read that line again and again until the words blurred. It wasn't an apology. It was an explanation from a boy who never learned how to be a man. I folded the letter and placed it next to the first one. 2 letters, 2 ghosts. Later that week, I met Richard one last time. "It's over," he said. "He's been charged, but out on bail. You don't have to worry anymore." I nodded. "I'm not worried. I just wish it hadn't come to this." He studied my face. "You still love him, don't you?" "Of course," I said softly. "Love doesn't disappear.
It just changes shape. I walked out of his office into the soft rain. For the first time in months, I didn't feel invisible. I felt like someone who had finally accepted her truth. That night, I opened my diary and wrote, "My son thought he buried me, but I simply stepped out of his world. Now he must live in the silence he created." The next morning, I went down to the beach before sunrise. The sky was bruised with shades of blue and orange, the waves restless. I took out the 2 letters and held them in my hand. Then, one by one, I let them go. The paper floated for a moment before the tide claimed it, pulling it away. As they disappeared, I whispered, "We both lost something, Daniel. You lost a mother, and I lost a son. Not to death, but to greed." The sea didn't answer. It just kept moving, endless, untamed, and calm. And maybe that was the point, because some stories don't end with forgiveness or revenge. Some just fade quietly, leaving behind the echo of what could have been. When the news about Daniel's arrest broke, the town I'd once called home reacted the way small towns always do, quietly, but with 1,000 whispers. I wasn't there to hear them, but Richard told me. The neighbors spoke in half-sentences. The mailman shook his head. The pastor said something about sins finding their way home. And somewhere between all those voices, my name was spoken again, not as a person, but as a memory. For weeks, I tried not to follow the updates, but curiosity has its own gravity. Every few days, I would buy a newspaper and read the headlines in tiny print, pretending I was reading about a stranger. Local businessman accused of forging family documents. Court grants bail amid ongoing investigation. The words felt distant, sterile, until I saw a photograph. Daniel, standing outside the courthouse, shoulders slumped, eyes hollow, his expensive suit wrinkled like it didn't belong to him anymore. He looked smaller somehow, like life had started to fold him back into himself. I should have felt relief. I should have whispered, he deserved it. But all I felt was the slow ache of motherhood, that unbearable mixture of pride and pity that refuses to die even when love is shattered. Days blurred into months. The rhythm of my new life remained the same. Mornings at the bakery, evenings by the sea. The townspeople started recognizing me, the quiet woman who always ordered chamomile tea, who smiled but never talked about her past. I became someone else's story. The widow with kind eyes, the lady who fed stray cats. And for the first time in years, I learned to sleep without checking my phone. Then one afternoon, Richard called again. "Ellie," he said softly, "the trial's over." "Already?" He pleaded guilty to fraud and forgery. The court sentenced him to community service and restitution. I didn't ask how long. I didn't ask how much. I just stared at the ocean outside my window. "He's still your son," Richard added gently. "No," I said. "He's a man now, and a man has to face his choices." We ended the call. For a long time, I sat in silence, listening to the hum of the waves. That's when it hit me. This was the real punishment. Not prison, not headlines. The punishment was knowing he couldn't run from what he'd done. Not anymore. A few days later, I received a small package. No return address, no note. Inside was the same photograph I used to keep on my bedside table. Daniel at age 8, holding a paper airplane, laughing into the sunlight. The frame was cracked, but the picture was intact.
At the back, in faint handwriting, were 4 words: "Still trying to fly." I traced those words with my fingers. For a moment, I saw the little boy again, the one who built castles out of cardboard and called me his superhero. And then I remembered the man he had become, and the silence returned. I placed the photo on the shelf next to my diary. I didn't cry this time. I just whispered, "Maybe one day you'll learn how to land." A week later, a letter arrived from the charity foundation I had created under the trust. They thanked me for the funds that were helping educate 10 orphaned girls in the city. Each child had written a thank you note, colorful, uneven letters with misspelled words but pure hearts. One of them wrote, "Dear Miss Ellie, I don't know who you are, but you helped me buy books. Someday I'll be a teacher and help other kids too." I smiled for the first time in months. That's when I realized the money Daniel stole had once been his future, but now it was building someone else's. Maybe this was life's quiet balance, one broken promise turning into 10 new hopes. Winter arrived. The coastal air grew sharp and salty. I spent Christmas Eve alone, lighting a candle by the window, whispering a small prayer, not for myself, but for Daniel. Wherever he was, I hoped he'd finally learned what I couldn't teach him with words, that love and greed can't share the same heart. I closed my eyes and listened to the sea wind. For the first time since the hospital, my chest felt light. I wasn't waiting for an apology anymore. I was waiting for peace, and it had finally come. The next morning, I walked to the edge of the pier. The sky was pink, the sun barely awake. I opened my diary one last time and wrote, "I disappeared to be forgotten. But sometimes, disappearing is how we remember who we are. I thought I lost everything, but I found something greater, myself." I closed the book, tied it with a ribbon, and placed it inside my bag. Then I looked out at the horizon and smiled. You paid your price, Daniel, and I paid mine. The waves rose and fell beneath me, gentle and endless. Somewhere between them, I felt forgiveness, not for him, but for myself.
It's been 2 years since I last saw my son. Not in person, not even in photographs. Sometimes I wonder where he is now. Maybe he's working again. Maybe he's trying to rebuild his life. Or maybe, like me, he sits by a window somewhere, thinking about everything he lost that wasn't money. I still live in the same coastal town. The bakery downstairs smells of cinnamon every morning, and the sea sings a different tune every night. People know me as Eleanor, the quiet woman who reads at the cafe, who smiles politely but never stays long in conversations. No one knows that behind that smile lives a story of betrayal, silence, and strength. But maybe that's okay. Maybe some stories are meant to be lived quietly, not told loudly. Sometimes I take a walk to the end of the pier, where the waves hit the wood and the wind feels like a whisker from the past. That's where I talk to him, not the man he became, but the little boy who once brought me wildflowers and promised me a garden. I tell him, "You broke my trust, but you also taught me how strong I can be." And somehow, I'm thankful, because if he hadn't taken everything, I would have never learned how much I truly had inside me. There are moments when I miss him so deeply that my chest feels heavy. But then I look around, at the ocean, at the children playing near the beach, at the sky that keeps changing but never stops, and I realize something. Pain doesn't disappear, it just transforms into wisdom. And forgiveness? Forgiveness is not about forgetting what they did.
It's about remembering what you deserve. Last week, I received a small postcard from a nearby city. No name, no return address, just a few words written in familiar handwriting. Mom, I'm working at a shelter now. I'm helping kids. Maybe it's not too late to learn from you. I read those lines again and again, and for the first time in years, I smiled, not with sadness, but with peace. Because maybe that was the ending I never expected, and the one I truly needed. That night, I sat by my window with a cup of tea and whispered into the darkness. Every story ends somewhere, but a mother's love never really does. The moonlight fell across my diary as I opened it one last time. On the final page, I wrote, "He betrayed me, but in the end, he became a better man because of it. And maybe that's the real price we both had to pay." I closed the book gently, placed it on the table, and looked straight into the camera, as if speaking to someone who might be listening. If my story touched you, don't forget to share it. Maybe someone out there needs this reminder that pain doesn't have to destroy you, it can shape you.